rethunk. So let's start the presentation. I ask you to maybe just in terms of logistics, keep your questions for the end. Oh, excuse me, there's a bit of a lag here. So if you look at agriculture in terms of the challenges that are before us, global population growth, and you are probably familiar with these numbers at a high level, are perceived to be increasing over the next 30 years to almost a billion people, and we're probably going to go above those numbers based on more current projections. And this means in order to supply food for this growing population, we need to increase food production 70%. And as an agricultural scientist and a producer, I still own a farm in Southern Ontario where I grew up. I farm it from a distance. I'm a true gentleman farmer with my sister, who's in Toronto. That increase at 70% is extremely concerning and a bit scary, to be completely frank. I mean, if you look at the level of production currently, particularly in more mature markets, we're going full out and producing very efficiently already. So to think that we need to increase to 70% through 2050 is quite a challenge. Currently, if you look at crop production, 62% is headed to human food directly. 35% is to animals, which is an extremely high number, and we'll talk about that dynamic a little bit later. And 3% is used for, say, ethanol production, corn that's sent to distillation, biodiesel as well, production of seed and other industrial products. And just as a bit of a historical context, you've heard about the first green revolution. Well, that started back in the 40s with a fellow named Norman Borlaug, a guy from an Iowa farm who grew up and became a crop scientist. And in the 1940s, he started a very directed program to crossbreed plants to have improved traits, including larger, more nutritious fruit and seeds, resistance to certain pests and diseases. There was a large increase in mechanization at the time as well. So the evolution from animals to tractors in particular. Increased use of inputs, including fertilizers and pesticides, which greatly improved yields and reduced losses. In particular, Borlaug was involved in the selection of new plant varieties, particularly dwarf plants, cereals. He was largely involved in, and you might think that, well, a dwarf plant, that's got to be a smaller plant, that means less yields. In fact, a dwarf plant means that you can add additional fertilizer to it without having excessive vegetative growth, which often causes lodging or the plant to fall over and make it difficult to harvest. So this was a big advancement. The optimization of things such as the planting density, application of fertilizers was a huge brought about a huge increase in yields. And along with the plant production, while there was a parallel intensification of animal production, you can see the example of a bird bred for meat over 50 years. You can see there's been a huge change in just the morphological characteristics of an animal, and indeed in terms of productivity, in terms of yield, those have been greatly enhanced, both in terms of genetic selection as well as improved nutrition and production methods. So during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we really were able to realize a lot of the advantages of these approaches, including increases in production and efficiency, which caused concomitant relative reduction in commodity prices around the world. And really, Borlaug was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize because it was estimated that his work saved billions of people from starvation and eventual death. So it was a great success in those perspectives. And you can see here, if you look at these three graphs of rice, corn, and wheat, you can see the relative production numbers in red and the relative price in green. In all three of these commodities, you see essentially a tripling of yield and a relative decrease in price. So these have been the real advantages realized over the years in terms of genetic improvement, use of fertilizers, pesticides, increased efficiency, et cetera. And Chad was talking about the bucolic idea of agriculture, and certainly, you look at a milk carton today, and you still see the pictures of cows out on the pasture. Some of the old ideas that we have of agriculture. Well, the reality is indeed quite different, and it's the same whether you're talking about Canada, United States, Argentina, Brazil, across Europe, and in China as well. So we've seen increased intensification, less and less diversification. So a lot of monocultures. Here you see a field of soybeans. Here in Argentina, a large collection of combines working to harvest the fields, and the intensification of livestock, a lot of monoculture of livestock in extreme densities, high energy feeds used to ensure adequate and optimized, maximized growth of animals. Now, obviously, over the last number of years, we've been also caught up with the downsides of this intensification. And I'm going to talk about a number of the major ones, but understanding that there are additional spin-off problems. In terms of soil, soil is I think it was last year was FAO's year of the soil for good reason. This 6-inch topsoil is essentially responsible for all of our production of food. And it's extremely, the equilibrium of soil is held in a very delicate balance. And the increased intensification of agriculture production, both animal and plants, has led to a number of problems in terms of deforestation. A few months ago, it was reported that for the first time in history, the Amazonian rainforest was a net exporter of carbon, or producer of carbon dioxide, versus what was used by the trees in the forest because of deforestation. And if you look at life cycle analysis of animal production, one of the biggest components is affecting negatively the production of, or the production of carbon dioxide in particular, is a result of deforestation. Not only because it takes away the ability of trees to take in carbon dioxide, but also a lot of that is used for cattle production, particularly in South America. Phosphorus saturation, you only have to take a look at Lake Erie. I grew up on the north shore of Lake Erie, just south of London, and it's a perennial problem, an annual problem. The production of green algae, which can be toxic at times, but it leads to large problems in terms of eutrophication of water bodies. Here in Quebec, it's a similar problem. In the south shore of the St. Lawrence, big issues around excess phosphorus in receiving water bodies. Organic matter degradation is a big issue in Canada, particularly in the eastern part of Canada. Organic matter in the soil is an important component of not only trapping carbon dioxide, but also as a structural component of soil, but also as a way of dealing with nutrients. Water obviously is a huge issue. Here in Canada, we're extremely fortunate to have large quantities of water, quality water. The utilization of water, however, if you look at California in particular, there's been huge issues around water scarcity. People are drilling wells deeper, using and trying to use conservation methods, but there is a lot of concern in a number of areas of the world as well. California is a good example of some of the issues. Contamination as well, obviously, not only by things like pesticides, nitrates from either fertilizer runoff or animal production. Those of you who might remember the Walkerton issue with E. coli from animal production, causing a number of deaths a lot of concern for groundwater. Obviously, air, you've heard about carbon dioxide and the issues around deep greenhouse gas problems, climate change. But there are other issues in agriculture, in particular nitrous dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane, CH4, which are both important greenhouse gases. They're not as persistent as carbon dioxide, but methane, for example, is 30 times more powerful, more problematic as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And these are all issues coming from agriculture to a certain extent. Biodiversity, I've talked about the problems with deforestation. However, issues in terms of monocultures regarding the issues around migrations, climate change, and the arrival of invasive species as a result of changing biodiversity. And finally, human health and animal health, antibiotic resistance as a result of the utilization of antibiotics as growth promotants and feeds, which is being banned. Finally, the issues around pesticides, obesity related maladies as a result of over-processed foods, and I would say generally poor eating habits as well as reduced physical activity. Nothing new for most of us, I assume. Now, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, I have to say, probably 20 years ago, I was a bit of a skeptic. However, over the last 20 years, I've been convinced of the real issues of greenhouse gases as it relates particularly to climate change. And when you take a look at Canada in particular, we have kind of a unique and contradicting situation regarding climate change as it relates to greenhouse gas. You know, the current government likes to cover itself in a green scarf and lauding their initiatives regarding sustainable development. Certainly, I can't write a grant application very easily without referring to the UN sustainable goals with good reason. But you know, Canada likes to look at itself as a real player in the green economy. And there are certain components to that. However, you know, if you look at Canada, it continues to promote a highly criticized source of non-renewable energy, the oil sands, particularly from the West. And what really surprised me a number of years ago when I learned that it continues to sell it at an extreme discount. I still scratch my head about it. I'm not an economist nor a commodity specialist, but I really don't quite understand that situation. And you know, when you look at some of the announcements of the FAO, and I'll just read this: climate change will have a significant implication for agriculture, food security by the middle of the century. Higher average temperatures, changes in precipitation, rising sea levels, increase in the frequency and intensification of extreme weather events, as well as the possibility of increased damage from pests and disease, are expected to affect crop and livestock production, as well as fisheries and aquaculture. And we're certainly seeing that already. You know, here in Quebec, for example, we see changes in the fisheries catches just based on climate change. You know, we've been expecting the cod to come back for the last 40 years, 30 years. And that's not happening to a large extent because of climate change. There are some populations that are increasing north of Newfoundland, but in general, the climate change is having a huge impact on biodiversity as well as climate events and higher temperatures and extreme events. You just have to look at California over the last couple of summers. The reality, however, is the Canada cropping sector may in fact benefit from global warming. And if you look at this picture from the FAO, they predict by 2050, the climate change, in particular greenhouse gas, so an increase in CO2 in the atmosphere, which will improve plant productivity, but also the fact that warming will allow marginalized land currently to be used for crop production. Canada may be in a really interesting position in terms of agricultural output. Now, you look across the world, and it's very much a different situation. I have had a lot of students, graduate students in particular, from Africa and from Asia, and it's a very different situation there, I can assure you. And then certainly when you look at Canada's far north, the situation is extremely concerning. At Laval University here, We have a very large research program in the north. It's been in place for the last 50, 60 years. A lot of research is currently being done up there to understand what's happening in terms of the environment. Here, one of my friends sent me a couple pictures of a dried up lake, as well as the collapsed permafrost, so a generalized thawing of permafrost in a lot of regions. You've also seen, I'm sure, the reports of glaciers being the melt causing sea rise, as well as localized changes in water systems there. Now, one might say, well, you know, the north, there's not a lot of people. It's not a real big deal. It's true to a certain extent. However, you know, our northern populations do still rely on migratory animals for their food to a large extent, to a certain extent, an important extent to a number of communities, to be honest. One of the issues, though, around thawing permafrost is that once this thaws, it releases huge amounts of methane, which is a bit of a cycle that just increases over time as a result. More warming causes more thawing, more methane being released. So this is a huge issue. The other issue, of course, is that reduced ice and snow cover causes increased warming, which is again a self actuating situation, unfortunately, as time goes on. So it's a bit of where we've been. I'd like to talk now about where we are going, in particular related to a couple of issues. So I really see the agri-food industry at a bit of a crossroads, particularly when it related to the impacts of a changing environment. Over the past 75 years or so, the industry has demonstrated itself to be extremely adaptive and resourceful. Many challenges have come up, and the implementation of knowledge and technology development has allowed us to overcome a lot of these challenges. You know, some examples of using genetically modified seeds, eventually animals, have allowed us to improve productivity and deal with some of the challenges. However, there's going to be a lot more challenges going forward. The current model of, as I say, feeding more people as cheaply as possible needs to be reconsidered. It's always a bit of a curiosity to me to see how people really seek out the cheapest alternatives for food. And I understand that to a certain extent, but when you look at the impacts of consuming highly processed cheap food, the impacts on health and well-being of people, I really think this needs to be reconsidered. And the fact that there's been an erosion of ecological impact in terms of natural resources, but also public health and consumer confidence is really not viable in the long term and needs to be addressed. And I think, you know, a good example of this has been the new Canadian Food Guide. I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at it. It came out a few years ago already. There really has been a number of fundamental changes. First of all, it's largely based, science-based, evidence-based removal of what we call big food lobby and influence. There's been a lot of ink spilled about that, by the way, in terms of that, particularly related to dairy. Removal of portion sizes to favor proportion, based largely on vegetables and fruit, whole grains, and plant-based proteins to a large extent. And also fluids based on water rather than beverages, including carbonated water, fruit juice, as well as flavored milk. It's always incredible to see the impact of consuming even fruit juice. You know, it's been marketed as a healthy alternative, but it's incredible the amount of sugar that's in a serving of fruit juice. Urging Canadians to think about what they eat, but how they eat, which is a real fundamental shift, and one that I was really impressed with. Cooking more often, teaching kids to cook, as opposed to going out to ordering food and eating highly processed foods. And finally, sharing meals, and sharing food traditions across generations and cultures. And Canada is particularly well positioned to take advantage of that, given the the large number of cultures that we have, particularly in urban centers. One of the other issues that has come up, and it was alluded to earlier, is the development of alternatives to red meat, and a huge amount of this work has been financed through Silicon Valley, and some of the large tech funds there. Questions regarding the ethics of eating animals, raising animals, the environmental aspects of eating animals, animal products, and the health impacts of eating animals as well. Now, just to be sure, just to specify, I enjoy eating meat as much as a lot of people do, but I think that a lot of questions need to be asked about that. And certainly, you know, the tendencies have come an awful long way over the past, I would say, 10, 15, 20 years. You know, when I was a kid, I don't think I ever ate tofu. I probably eat it maybe once a week now, and it depends on how you prepare it. It's true, but it's certainly come a long way. You've all heard about the Beyond Meat and other alternatives to meat patties in particular. Those are interesting, although they tend to be highly processed. So there's a lot of questions regarding that, but I think they're a very interesting product. Just as a bit of an aside, my wife and I, when these first came out in A&W, we went and had a very high-end lunch at the mall, and we ordered a regular burger and a soy Beyond Meat burger because it was just introduced in A&W, and we really couldn't tell the difference. It was really impressive to see the technological developments. Now, again, the ultra processed component of it needs to be questioned. And more recently, you've maybe heard about cellular or cultured meat, where they use cell culture and some of the technologies that have been developed in the biomedical field to produce meat. More recently, I saw a Japanese group that came up with essentially what looks like a Wagyu steak based on 3D printing of different tissues on a piece of meat. It was really incredible. Now, this Wagyu steak was probably 1,000 times more expensive than a regular Wagyu steak, but it's going to come down, and that's the reality. It's here to stay, and market forces are going to bring this to the fore. So we need a second green revolution, that's for sure. 2.0, based on a requirement of 70% increased requirement for food product, and also the issues related to particularly environmental issues. So how do we deal with that in a way? And again, there's been a lot of ink spilled about the dynamic of and the trade-offs between the requirements of production, consumer desires and needs, and environmental realities. So obviously, we have to reconcile agricultural requirements and resource conservation, and those are underway to a very large extent. I can assure you, both on the scientific side as well as on the industrial side. Food production will need to take place under greater climate unpredictability due to rising levels of CO2 and adverse or very important impacts. You know, I mentioned I have a farm in Southern Ontario. It's a very small farm. It's considered a hobby farm these days compared to what's being farmed typically by real farmers, I'll say. You know, it started. We had a great crop going, and then it started raining in August, which is usually the opposite, and really didn't stop until November. We managed to get our soybeans off because of a very helpful neighbor. But you know, I saw pictures on Twitter of some folks I follow, and they're still harvesting corn today with the frozen fields finally being able to get on the field. So it's been a real issue. And if you look at the Southwest North America, it's burning up there, and it's been burning up for years, and I don't think it's going to change by most accounts. We need to take into account technological innovations, which are being increasingly developed rapidly because of the needs that are out there. We will need to move towards genetic modifications and biotechnology. A few years ago, one of my colleagues here was involved in developing what's called CRISPR-Cas9 technology, gene editing technology, which is a revolution, both in biomedicine, but also in agriculture. It allows you to go and edit the genome of an organism with extreme extreme precision and very easily, very cheaply, which allows rapid technology development as well as democratization. So anybody can do it essentially. I could start doing gene editing here in my lab, and it's something we're looking at doing at some point. We're also going to be feeding increasing urban populations, obviously. I don't have to tell a group from Toronto about this, but interestingly, there's been a number of efforts. On the left here is Lufa Farms, which is growing greenhouses on the top of commercial buildings. There was a large one here in Quebec City that was planned. I don't know if it's still on the table. It was ready to go just before COVID, but with the supply issues and economic realities, we'll see. This idea of vertical farming, so farming in either hydroponic, aeroponic, aquaponic systems are becoming reality. I'm involved in a couple of projects there. And here's an example on the right in the Netherlands of a floating dairy farm. The Netherlands is 50 years in advance of what's happening here in North America in terms of ideas, and it's always a pleasure speaking with my colleagues from Wageningen University in the world leader in agricultural research.
Grant, I'm going to have to ask you to come to a conclusion to your talk pretty soon, okay, because we're past time.
Okay, what I'm going to talk about I wanted to talk about a little bit of food waste and how we're dealing with food waste in my lab. So currently, we're looking at using insects to upcycle food waste. And the idea is that a number of species have been looked at for not only direct human consumption, but also using the larvae to eat waste organics, food waste essentially, and turn it into valuable protein. And here you can see the advantages of using something like mealworms versus production of milk, pork, chicken, and beef in terms of CO2 and land use, extremely lower footprint. We're looking at black soldier fly because it eats pretty much anything, the larvae does, and it's got a very rapid production cycle. And the idea here is to use hatched larvae to put on food waste, and they grow up over 10 or 12 days. They are harvested and then fed to animals. You also have a leftover that's used as fertilizer, and part of it goes back to complete the cycle. It's very interesting to produce fish feed, chicken feed, pet food, as well as organic amendment for soil. And here's just a bit of an example. I just wanted to show you. It's a time-lapse video of these black soldier fly larvae attacking a Big Mac, which a lot of you might consider as food waste in its entirety. But essentially, it's an interesting example of their ability to eat cereal, bread, vegetables, fruits, as well as meat. So it's it just shows the diversity or the ability of these larvae, and this is over 4 hours. So they have a huge capacity to consume that. They have high levels of protein and lipids. So this is a black soldier fly larvae, a housefly larvae, and a mealworm versus fish meal and soy meal. And they've been used largely to feed a large number of animals to replace common feed ingredients. So essentially, we're taking waste, upcycling it, and producing an alternative, eco-friendly feed for animals. And that way, you're able to take high-quality feed ingredients and feed it to humans where it should be fed. Just to let you know, it's been approved in Canada for poultry as well as aquaculture. So Canada is one of the leaders in approving this product. A lot of it, though, is going to cats and dogs. Cats and dogs were very much unaware of this, but they are huge consumers of very high quality feed ingredients that needs to be considered as well. So, we all love our fur friends, our pets. We have a number at our house, but the impact is really quite remarkable. One of the issues, I'm gonna finish up here in a couple slides, is major challenges are scale up. So how do you scale this up to an industrial level? The feed industry is a huge animal itself, and how to feed that in a regular with regular way with high quality insect-based feeds is really important. There are a lot of growing players rapidly. This is already a little bit old. AgroProtein is no longer with us, and there's a number of companies in Canada as well. We're working with a Netherlands-based company, Protix. They're producing 40,000 tons a year of dried black soldier fly larvae, mostly going into poultry and fish diets as well as pet diets for the insect. Just a bit closer to home as I finish up here, Aspire Food Group, one of our partners, is building a brand new plant. They're going to be the world's largest cricket producer in London. You can see the plant from the 401. In fact, as you go by, they're going to be finishing their production later this year. And they're one of our partners in a new chair program that we have at Laval to train the next generation of insect producers as well as insect entrepreneurs. So as a bit of a closing remark, these problems in the agri-food industry are important. They're extremely complex and they require very much a multifaceted approach to resolve them, both in terms of technical, but also societal. The social sciences need to be involved. Unfortunately, we tend to, both as consumers as well as politicians and regulators, look for simple answers. And we need to reconsider that as well as we move forward to make sure that we have the full picture of the opportunities that lay ahead of us. So that's my message for today. Don't be afraid of insects. Don't be afraid to feed your pets insects, and don't be surprised if the food that you're going to be consuming has some component of insects as a way of better managing food waste as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have some questions for Gary?
Yeah, I've got a question, Sandy. It seems to me that in order to ramp up food production, some of the countries that used to produce vast amounts of food, and as you said, bread baskets like like southern Russia and places like that, which are very much in the headlines today, and places like Southern Rhodesia, or as it's called today, Zimbabwe, which used to be the breadbasket of Africa. Yeah. Some of these countries really need to somehow or another, if the wars and things that are going on in these places could be reduced, we could get back to producing some food in these places, which would help no end.
Yeah, I think you're right. Certainly, the political controversies and potential wars and conflicts in these areas is a huge issue. I mean, I think currently we produce plenty of food. A lot of it gets wasted, but a lot of it is also stopped in terms of distribution as a result of these conflicts. So I certainly agree that this is a continuing issue.
I have a question. I just wondered, Grant, if the population is going from 7 to 9 billion, and that's what 27-28%, why food production has to go up 70?
Well, a lot of it is based on the inefficiencies of producing animals. So that's assuming that the same proportion of animals are being produced, and the loss of efficiency in terms of producing that type of the required foods in order to produce those animals.
I have a question,
Yeah.
Grant. You mentioned, upscaling and increasing the food production, but there's also another trend here about growing local. So the traditional sense about the environmental impacts is by the time you ship from exotic locations, etc., the impacts of that are pretty horrendous. So how do you reconcile the increase, what you're saying, your thesis versus more growing local?
Well, I think there's huge opportunities. We're involved in some of these local, even urban production of food, and there are real opportunities there. Especially, there in my mind, we're going to have to also reconcile the economic realities of transporting food. That is a huge issue, not only in terms of logistics, but at some point, the environmental impacts are not truly expressed, and we're going to have to reckon with that. Certainly, if you look at some of the provincial agricultural ministries' policies coming out, there is a huge interest in growing food locally, not only for environmental reasons, but also for political reasons, to stop relying on foreign food producers and being more sufficient, being more autonomous to avoid some of the issues that are coming up with pandemics or with political disagreements, borders being closed, things of this nature. Yeah, for sure, there's an opportunity there.
I think we're going to have to bring this to a conclusion. Nan, would you like to thank our speaker? Is Nan around?
Just unmuting. I'm certainly here.
Oh, there you are. Good.
Here I
Okay.
am. Grant, that was absolutely amazing. I could have listened to you for hours. I'm sorry we didn't have more time. I had no idea that in the 1940s we were already crossbreeding plants, and we went all the way from a history lesson to a very positive future. I must admit, when you were saying that production needed to be up by 70%, I thought, my goodness, how are we going to do this by 2050? But in listening to all the various routes that you've gone and analyzing this, it really makes me feel, you say you're a positive scientist, you certainly have made me feel positive that we will find ways of handling all of our issues that are facing us today. And I just want to say thank you so much. It was so enlightening.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure. It's important as well as a scientist that we get our message out to the grassroots level, to people, to the consumers out there, and stop just talking to fellow scientists. So thanks very much to all of you for your attention, and thanks in particular to Ed for helping to organize this little talk. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Grant.
Grant,
We're gonna go on with
can I just say, I hope it's not going to come down to us having to eat ants and things like that.
Well, you know what? Here's the deal. I'm organizing an international conference. It's hopefully going to be here in Quebec City in June. It's called Insects to Feed the World, and part of this is to deal with to better articulate this emerging industry. But North America and Western Europe are the only places that don't eat insects, and apparently ants are delicious. I've never eaten them myself, but apparently they're a delicacy. So there you are.
Chocolate covered.
Okay. Grant, we're going to go on with our business meeting. You can stay if you want or leave. But
I'm going to
thank
let you
very
guys. I'm going to let you guys go. Thanks again, and stay safe.
much. Okay.
Thanks, Grant. Yeah.
Michael,
Au revoir. Bye-bye.
a report from the president, Michael.
Thank you, Sandy. Last night was our first board meeting since November. It was a light agenda. We because of the holidays and COVID shutdown, so it wasn't a great deal to report. There's no motions that need to come before the club. However, I just wanted to say that remind everyone about Jennifer Jones visiting in July. She'll be here on July 5th, 2022. That'll be David Richardson will be president at that time. We are going to approach the district to see if there's any way we can participate in any events or whatever is going to be done when she's visiting. David, do you have anything to add to that? Yeah. No? Okay. Just another reminder that the Rotary Leadership Institute, part 1 is on February 9th. If you're a newer member or you've never done the Leadership Institute, it's really worth taking. It's $20 to take, and it's by Zoom in evenings. So it'll be February 9th, 16th, and 23rd, 6 to 9. The $20 that you pay to take this course is a donation to the foundation. And having taken all 3 courses, I can tell you it's very worthwhile. It fills in a lot of the gaps about what Rotary does and the inner workings, and so highly recommend you take it. Also, just a quick reminder that February 8th is also Tuesday Talks again. These are the district free courses, and The next one coming up is co-hosted by our own Ron Denham. It'll be on WASH. And also remind you that there'll be no Rotary After Hours this month, obviously because of the shutdowns of the restaurant. Hopefully all that changes. We'll know more, I guess, very soon. Mr. Ford is supposed to make some kind of announcement regarding reopenings. So hopefully we can start seeing each other in person in Modest. And that's all the announcements I have at the moment. Is there anything else?
Thank you, Mike. Are there any committee reports today? I don't hear any chairman speaking up. No? Any other business anybody wants to talk about? Okay, well, see you next week.
Oh, hold on, Sandy. Don't we have a report from, we haven't done Happy Bucks?
Well, we haven't done Happy Bucks. That's
We
right.
haven't had a report from Joe?
Right, okay.
Here.
Happy Bucks, are there Happy Bucks? Well, I said this week is going to be my 5th great grandchild's first birthday, so I'm going to put up 25 Happy Bucks for that.
And and I have to put up 20 Happy Bucks because the other great grandchild is having a birthday in February. My grandchild.
Well, then I'll join you two and I'll put in 20 because I have my first grandchild arriving in about 3 weeks. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, good.
Welcome to the club. Hey.
Yeah.
I'll put up 10 because my girls get to go back to school and see their friends and keep learning. It's a good thing.
Okay,
That's it?
that seems to be it. Joe, have you got something to tell us about COVID?
Just one thing, the authorities in Canada have approved the use of the Pfizer product called, where did I put it? Paxlovid, which is has been shown to decrease hospitalization and death in patients with COVID-19 if it's taken very early, like within 5 days of the onset of symptoms. And this is an important advance, but the problem is that it has to be initiated very, very early. And most people don't know that they've got COVID that quickly. The rest of the information you can get in the popular press, which is full of COVID.
Good.
Sandy, I have just one more announcement.
Yes.
Our club received a certificate of appreciation from the district for our financial support to the End Polio Now Countdown to History campaign. We got this for making a contribution that's $1,500 US or more. So we get this terrific big thing that we'll somehow share with everyone.
Where is the repository of all these things, Mike?
I'm not quite sure. I know Walter has some things in his basement. I think Lois has some things. I have some things. I know David has some things.
I have some
spread
things.
around. Yeah.
There isn't really any one place,
No.
so, and I don't know how we would make a place since we don't have a permanent home.
No.
I will digitize this and put it into our library if someone ever wants to see it again. How's that?
Good.
All right.
Is there
So
anything else?
Sandy, I just want to say one thing. If you're closing off, I just want to say we have another guest with us. Jofia has joined us and she had to come late because of another commitment. So I'm not sure how much you got to see of the speech. It was a very good speech, but it's nice to see you.
Yes, indeed. Hello.
Great to see these new members or new
Yes,
prospective
indeed.
members. Yeah.
Is there anything else for the good of Rotary? No? Well, we'll see you next week then.
Do any of the you guests want to say a word?
No?
I have to unmute. Well, I'd just like to say thank you very much. That was an interesting speaker. I enjoyed that very much, and it was nice to sort of virtually briefly meet all of you.
Good. Thank you for coming, John. Okay,
All right, thank you.
see you next week.
Yeah. See you, everyone.